These are the personal recollections of retired Army Colonel Roger McAlister.
Vietnam. During the 19 years the United States was involved in the Vietnam conflict, the U.S. deployed over 2.7 million personnel into that war zone. Many were drafted, but a far greater number had volunteered to join the military during the conflict. A common question asked of those volunteers was, why would you ever sign up for war? The context that frames the question of volunteering can be found at the very end of President Kennedy's inaugural address in 1961.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
I wanted to be part of America. I wanted to do something for America because I was an expatriate kid. You know, I grew up, my sister and I, we went to Turkish schools, we went to Lebanese schools. We didn't know a lot of Americans growing up. We were part of a real multinational community. And I was just on fire about being an American. And so how do I serve my country? Back in 1960, we just said join the service. And everybody knew what that was. There was only one service, you know, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And I wanted to be part of that.
ROTC.
And as soon as I got into college, one of the first electives I chose was ROTC. So I did the full 4 years of ROTC. And at Dickinson College, where I went to school, they had a unique new thing. The Army had just started a program called the ROTC Flight Training Program, whereas it's about $1 million to train a pilot. And you can only test so much. There's a physical, there's a math and science test, and there's a STANINE test, psychological profile. And for aviators, I think they want us pegged right up against the red line without going over. But still, after all that testing, you'll get people that'll get $750,000, $800,000 through flight school, and it comes time for them to solo and they clutch. They can't do it. They either can't take off or they get in the air and they can't land. We had one case like that when I was in flight school. We got a guy up there. He would line it up. He would start coming down, and then he'd take off again. And they got his IP on the radio with him, so he would hear the same voice to try to talk him down. And then what they did was they quickly loaded us all in the buses and took us back to the barracks and cut off training for the day. And unfortunately, yeah, he came in, but he came into a bunch of bleachers, and he died. And I guess they didn't want the rest of us to see that.
Officer Basic and Aviation School.
As an ROTC graduate, you get your lieutenant bars, but you're non-specific in terms of what your skill set's going to be. And the military pretty well determines for you what your skill set's going to be based on their needs. And I had a pretty good math and science background, so I was assigned to be an artillery officer. I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Officer basic course was about 3.5 months. And we learned everything from priming and loading and, you know, cannon cocking and firing up to doing survey work, doing forward observer work. It was real world stuff, and I'd never done anything like it before. So when that finished, I was then assigned to the 3rd Howitzer Battalion, 6th Artillery, which was a self-propelled 105 unit. And I served there for several months, and it was kind of interesting because just after 2 or 3 months of being there, the exec officer left, the S3 left, the S4 left, all the battery commanders left, and suddenly we had second lieutenants as battery commanders, and executive officers, which was a major's job, was a first lieutenant. We had a captain as a battalion commander, which should be lieutenant colonel. Where are all these people going? And they said to Southeast Asia. They were cleaning out these people to send them over as advisors to the South Vietnamese Army. As they were putting together this air mobile assault idea at Fort Benning, Georgia, that created a huge vacuum and a need for helicopter pilots. And as I said, I wanted, when I went on active duty, I wanted to be an aviator. And for a while, I thought I wasn't going to get that. I was just going to be an artillery officer. But due to the Asian Games starting, as I said, there was a big vacuum and a need for helicopter pilots. And so after only about 4 months with this training battalion, my number came up, and I packed my gear at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and drove due south to Fort Walters, Texas, and was introduced to a H-23 helicopter, little, you can tell it's Mattel, the little bubble helicopter. And that's a great training vehicle in that there's nothing automatic about it. There's a motorcycle throttle handle, there's a collective, there's anti-torque pedals, there's a cyclic, you know, it's like learning to drive with a stick shift, in other words. You got to learn it all from the ground up. And a great training vehicle, because once we finished our basic there and went on to Fort Rucker, Alabama, that's when we got into Hueys, because that's the helicopter we're going to have to fly in Vietnam. Everything was automatic. It's the easiest, smoothest flying machine in the air. However, you know, Murphy's Law, things go wrong. The throttle coordination, the linkage, the pedal, the avionics, the hydraulics. Now what do? Beep, 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 lights going on. Things getting crazy in the cockpit. I'm back to flying at H-23 again. I'm back to the manual transmission, stick shift, and you just do it, because that's what we trained on.
Sent to Vietnam.
I graduated from Fort Rucker in about February 1966. I had 30 days leave, and I think I took every day of it. And then arrived in Vietnam in March 1966, and was there until April of '67, 13 months. Yeah, I was sent via direct to Tan Son Nhut, Saigon, and I got there, and on the board they had next 126 helicopter pilots via direct first cav. I got up there. The natural thing now to assign me to as an artillery officer was the closest thing they could get to that was the 2nd of the 20th Aero Rocket Artillery. Unique unit, brand new, tactics, never been done before. And it was marvelous, actually, in that I took all my field artillery experiences and skills, I took all my helicopter skills and put those together. And I didn't know I could do that until I got there. And of course, what they do with you is the first 4 or 5 missions you go on are really kind of dry fire things. You go on, one of the more experienced guys takes you up in the air, says you've got it out in the field. And they've got hooches and burned out tank hulls and things like that. And you learn how to attack that. You learn what altitude, what direction, how to go about it. And then you're a co-pilot for probably about a month. Eventually you become an aircraft commander. Now you're in charge. You have a co-pilot, a crew chief, and a door gunner. And then after a couple more months, you become the squadron commander. You've got the whole fleet of helicopters, and they're yours.
UH-1B, Wingman, Aerial Rocket Artillery.
Yeah, the configuration of the aircraft we went into battle with was UH-1 Bravo model Huey. It had 48 rocket pods on the side that took 2.75-inch rockets. You could fire anywhere from 1 pair up to 24 pair, and 1 pair was equal to a 105 howitzer round. So some very, very serious damage you could do at the other end of that. As the aircraft commander or wing commander, I would sit in the front left seat. My co-pilot was to the right. To the right rear was a door gunner with an M60 machine gun. That was free. You know, he could use that wherever he wanted, and it was important that it was free, because as we'd pass over targets or whatever, and we began to get fire from the ground, he had to be able to go back with that machine gun. Please don't shoot my tail rotor off, and you know, and cover us from behind. Left rear was a crew chief. He owned that aircraft. I didn't. I had 12 helicopters. I would fly a different one every day. That crew chief never left that helicopter. He knew every nut and bolt in it. He owned it, and that was important. He also, on the left side, had an M60 machine gun. We would probably carry about 4,000 rounds, 2,000 each side, 48 rockets, as I say, each one a 105 howitzer round, and we always flew in a minimum of a flight of 2. And that was for tactical reasons, in that when we had a target on the ground trying to support the American infantry, they would mark it with smoke and say, bunker machine gun 15 meters northeast of the yellow smoke. So I would line up first. I would go in. I'd select 1 pair, only conserving ammunition, and send 1 pair of rockets into the 15 meters northeast. After that was fired, I would pull up in the air like this, and you can imagine pulling up in the air like this is almost open yourself up to a huge sucker punch. But the tactics they developed at Fort Benning were great. As soon as my tail broke, my wingman, who was about a half a mile behind, his door gunner and crew chief would open up with machine gun fire on that area. So if they were trying to shoot up at me, at least they were ducking while they were doing it. I mean, if my guy wasn't in position, you know, I was probably going to buy the farm if he wasn't there to cover me. And, you know, one day in particular, that did happen. I didn't get any fire. I took 4, 5, 6 rounds. And I'm on the radio, "Bravo, where in the hell are you? Bravo, Bravo, where are you?" And then I hear a call from White Fox 16 on the ground. He says, "Falcon Alpha, your other ship's down. He's in the trees." So he did come in, and what happened was we took out this machine gun nest, but there was another one over here we didn't know about. And so when he overflew that, they shot him up from the rear end. Tail rotor, part of the tail boom came off, total loss of control into the trees. You know. The infantry commander on the ground, you talk about instant ability. I mean, why ARA was actually better than field artillery. We would pop that set of rounds off, the first 2, break. That company commander on the ground would come back up 5 more meters to the east. We're talking about 15 to 20 seconds after the first rounds went off. He would go another 5 meters, this time probably 2 to 4 rockets. By the time he was breaking out, I was back on his tail to cover him. And at that point in time, typically the company commander or RTO on the ground, you know, would say, "On target, let them have it, blow the shit out of them." And so, you know, we turned it up to 4, 5, and 6 pair. And we always went at least 2 at a time to cover each other.
A normal day.
A normal day in the life of an ARA officer is probably a 4 or 5 in the morning briefing in a bunker somewhere, and we get information that intelligence has got a lot of bad guys up in a certain valley, and they're going to air assault in there. 5 and 6 D model Hueys carrying 6 to 8 infantry soldiers, 11 Bravos, dropping them in the field, get out, another 6 or 8 come in until we can get 1, 2, 3 companies on the ground. We would link up with them about 5 minutes out from the LZ. We'd see them coming along, and we get one on one side and one on the other. And as you can imagine, the most vulnerable time for the soldiers and those helicopters coming into that landing zone is when they kind of zero out, no airspeed, 3 feet off the ground, GIs jumping off the skids, running into the trees and the bushes, and they're dead stop, until they can get up in the air again. So as they're reaching the air assault area, we would go out a little in front of them, and this clump of trees, that set of bushes, where logically, the enemy would set up bunkered or heavy positions, and we could kind of fire at will. And then they would hit the LZ, they'd begin offloading people, we'd pull back around again, the infantry would begin moving into the trees, we're hooked up on the FM radio with the ground commanders, and we're listening, and they're saying, 1, 2, okay, take the first platoon, go across the river, blue, go on the right, give covering fire to Alpha 1-6.
Distinguished Flying Cross.
We were in support of Alpha Company 1st of the 7th. I'm very proud to say that was the old Hal Moore unit that had been in the Idrang Valley. Books have written about that, and Hal Moore is one of the greatest soldiers I have ever met and had the pleasure to serve with. He was no longer in command of that battalion. I think he'd rotated by then, but it was Alpha Company 1st of the 7th on the ground. And they weren't on the ground 3 minutes, and we began to hear them talk to each other and the machine gun chatter in the background, so now we know we've got a hot situation. On a normal day, if you will, if there's such a thing, they might be on the ground 10, 15, 20 minutes, and no contact of any kind whatsoever, and they'd say, Falcon, Roger, thanks for the insert, RTB, return to base. They don't need us anymore. But this day, within about 3 to 5 minutes, they made contact. The intel guys knew what they were doing, and they put them in a hell of a hornet's nest. And so we got very busy, taking out these targets that were knocking down our infantry guys in the elephant grass and the tree lines. It was getting very, very busy, and the company commander called up and he said, Falcon, he said, I need medevac down here. He said, I got about 4 bleeders, medic can't get them stopped, got to get them out of here. Well, one of my rocket runs after adjusting, I'm pulling up, and I flipped over to what we call dust off, the medevac frequency, and I said, we need dust off at LZ Eagle, Toot Sweet. There were about 2 other companies in that valley that day, and they'd also made contact, and it was just a real hornet's nest. And he came back and said, Roger, Falcon, understand, relay to Alpha Company Commander, it'll be about 2-0 before we can get there. Well, I fired some more rockets, adjusting them, and it's very busy what you're doing up there. Relayed to the company commander on the ground, it'd be 20 minutes before we could, dust off could come in. I've never heard or felt such a response over a radio, but I think his exact words were, Roger, thank you, understand, but we may have to bag them here. That means body bags. Something I need to interject here, it was absolutely forbidden, regulations, SOP, tactical requirements. No gunships like mine were ever to land in what's called a hot LZ, which is what they had down there. The reason being, in this Bravo and sometimes Charlie model Hueys, We had every radio conceivable. I could talk to the B-52s. I could talk to the naval gunfire guys as an artillery officer. In fact, I adjusted naval gunfire a number of times. I could call in the Phantoms with the napalm. I had all the radios in the world. We had these 48 rocket pods with what's called an intervalometer, the electronics that could fire 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 pair. And if the LZ got overrun and I was down there, they would get all those goodies. They would get the keys to the kingdom. And that's why it was a good regulation. It was a good rule. It was made for good reasons. And I knew that our battalion commander was somewhere in the area that day listening in on all these different battles that were going on. So I couldn't say anything over the air, but when he said that we may have to bag them here, as I said, this unique frequency that military people have with each other, particularly in air crew. I looked around the cockpit, door gunner, crew chief, co-pilot, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. My next transmission was back to, I think it was White Fox 16. I said, break, break, change that. I said, we got a medevac, about a half a mile final coming in from the south. Lay down all the suppressive fire you can. Let's get them in, let's get them out. He came back and he said, Falcon, all I see is you lining up on a short final. Yeah, I can see the rocket pods, your door gunner and crew chief hanging out the sides. He's saying things I don't want him to say. And I came back, I said, negative, negative, Fox. You see a big D model Huey with a red cross on the side of it coming in to pick up your men because I'm not allowed to land here. Well, I'm sure this guy was from West Point because he got it just like that. He came back, oh, Roger, now I see the medevac with the big red cross on it. Well, we went shooting in there, and his guys slid these guys on the rear deck of the helicopter, and we got out of there. My wingman understood it too. He gave me all the suppressive fire he could. We took 17 rounds in the aircraft that day, and amazingly, none of us were touched, not the guys in the back or any of our crew. I went as fast as that Huey would take us to a little MASH hospital that was out there like about 4 minutes away. I called into them. I told them I had 4 acute, get them out here. The med-surg teams were there. They rushed out to the helipad when we came in. They offloaded these guys. Then one of the techs came around to my side of the window and he said, sir, he said, we didn't get any call sign from you when you came in to land. And he says, I have your tail number here on the clipboard, but I need your call sign. And I took the paper off the clipboard and ripped it out of his hands. And I said, I was never here. And we got out of there. Another interesting part of the story is now I got to go back to this fire base. And I got all these bullet holes in the aircraft. I got all this blood in the back seat. And yet, none of us were hit by anything. And I'm not allowed to land in a hot LZ. How am I going to explain all this? So there was a little river that ran about a mile from the fire base that had some sandbars on it that was above ground. And we'd been there before to just watch the helicopter. So we went shooting in there. All 4 of us jumped out of the helicopter and grabbed our steel pots and began dipping it in the river, sloshing it in the back seat to clean out all the blood, and then quick jump back in and go back to our fire base. And, you know, the mechanics and the maintenance guys came out and, oh my God, where have you been? What did you do? And I said, well, you know, it's just busy out there today, business as usual. What happened as a result of this, my whole crew was highly decorated, and they certainly deserved it. I was called in about a month later to the battalion commander's office. And he said, Lieutenant McAlister, he said, you're aware of the regulations about no landing in a hot LZ? Well, absolutely, sir. He said, well, I hold here in my hand a write-up from Alpha Company 1st to 7th commander who says that on December so-and-so, you landed in the middle of LZ, picked up 4 of his men, medevaced them, got them to the hospital. All 4 of them survived only due to your quick action and leadership and blah, blah, blah. What do you have to say about that? I said, well, sir, you and I both know the regulations. That's not possible, and I couldn't have done that. And he said, so in other words, this recommendation for Distinguished Flying Cross, I've got to kick it back down to him, and then this never happened. I said, yes, sir, this never happened. Whew. Thought it went away. About 4 months later, I get called back into his office again. And he says, now, Captain McAlister, I've been promoted. He said, this LZ Eagle 1st to the 7th thing just won't go away. And I said, well, what do you mean, sir? He said, well, he says that company commander, as I say, it must have been a West Pointer, you know, he wrote up a new version of what happened there that day, saying that they had 4 people that were critical and that you flew low and slow as a decoy over the enemy machine gun positions, drawing their fire so that the medevac helicopter could land and load these people. And you again flew low and slow over the enemy machine gun positions, getting a total of 17 hits in their government property, to allow the medevac plane to then disembark and save their lives. Is that what happened? Yeah, sir, I remember something like that. And he said, well, I have one other problem. I said, well, what is that, sir? He says, back in my office, I got a hard stripe Sergeant E5 named Donald Frederick. He was one of those 4 guys. And the last thing he remembers, as they were carrying him out in that poncho, sliding him into the back of some helicopter, was he looked up and he remembered the tail number. I can't remember what it is today, but like 650429er. And the last, and he just had that etched in his memory. Well, he was patched up here, flew back to the States, had some R&R, volunteered to re-up, to come back for another tour in Vietnam, if he could be the door gunner on 654029 for the guy that pulled him out of the jungle. What do you say about that? And I said, well, sir, I said, you know, when the medics treat these guys out in the field, they hit them up with morphine pretty heavy, and they're all loopy and crazy, and you know, maybe he saw me on that low pass going over, and that's what he thought it was. And he said, Captain, he said, I imagine that if I marched your co-pilot, your crew chief, and your door gunner in here, they'd tell me the same pack of lies, wouldn't they? And I said, yes, sir, I'm sure they would. And he said, you have a new door gunner, and at 1400 hours this afternoon, you are to report to division headquarters, where the 2-star Major General himself is going to pin this decoration on you. And I think you need to take your new door gunner with you. So I have a picture of that, Major General Casey, who was then the division commander of the 1st Gap, pinning that decoration on me. And standing right behind me is Sergeant Frederick. And as he's doing that, he looks over at Sergeant Frederick and he said, Sergeant, he said, you should be real proud to be able to fly with an officer like Captain McAlister. Frederick had a great sense of humor, too. You know, he kind of leaned forward and saluted, and he said, yes, sir. He said, you have no idea.
Shot down.
Yeah, did we have contingency plans, you know, to save the helicopter from being in the bad guy's hands, absolutely. And it was very clever. I think some Spec 4 figured it out in the jungle or something. But we all carried some grenades in the cockpit with us as well. Now, grenades going off in a cockpit, it doesn't work out very well, for crews and people like that. So we had all the grenades we carried had, we called it 90-knot tape, but it's like duct tape wrapped around the handle as an extra safety margin, to pull in the pin. And in the event you lost an aircraft, and one time during one of these events it got real messy on the ground. When I came out, I took a couple rounds, went through the turbine, and it all came apart. Woo! Engine RPM. And the only place I had to drop it was in this light forest. It's a good thing it wasn't heavy wood, but it was light, a lot of bamboo and stuff like that. We went down, and we were about 400 meters from where the friendlies were. Fortunately, there were no bad guys between us and the friendlies. Well, but they saw us come down, so they're sending troops out there to get us and to get the helicopter, like right now. What our SOP was, get everything we could carry, and then take one of these grenades, pull the pin on it, unscrew the gas cap, and drop the grenade into the fuel tank. What happens, the fuel that we used in those aircraft was called JP4, jet propulsion fuel, JP4. JP4, within about 3 minutes, attacks duct tape. It just eats into it. And after 3 to 4 minutes, the duct tape goes, the pin's already been pulled, bing, 4, 5, 6, kaboom, So you use the helicopter, and what fuel is left in the tank, Oh, and there's nothing left. There's absolutely nothing left. The beauty of that time was, it was funny, we made it out through along the edge of a dike and rice paddy going over to meet up with our friendlies, and we were about 100 meters from the good guys, about 300 meters from where we'd had to dump it, and I think the co-pilot yelled, "Oh, look, they're there," and we could see about a dozen of NVA in their khakis and all that, just coming in like ants crawling all over the helicopter, and then boom, it went off. So we got credit for 12 KIA that day, although I lost $1 million aircraft.
Served or not served?
Is there a difference in how I relate to people who have served and not served? Yeah, absolutely. I have to say that there's an institutional bias that I have. After I got off active duty, I went to work for a General Electric company, started through a management training program, and within 3 months, I just missed the military. And yet I wanted to see if the skills they had given me would be good for any more than being a combat attack helicopter pilot. And it turned out they really were. But I missed the military terrifically, and I had gotten a little bit of ink in the local Connecticut newspaper about my service and some of my decorations, and I got a call from the governor of the state of Connecticut, invited me to lunch. I thought that was nice. And we went into a private dining room, and then a 2-star general walked in to join us that I didn't know about. By military people, they can quickly look to your breast and see your whole DD-214, so you know who you're dealing with. Well, this was the real deal. It wasn't just some National Guard or a reserve. He was a 2-star, gone to West Point. In fact, he was on Westmoreland's staff at MACV. And it was an old friend of the governor's who the governor had asked him to come off active duty and be the TAG, the Adjutant General of Connecticut, in charge of all the military, because they were beginning to staff up the Connecticut Guard with Hueys and Loaches and forming an attack helicopter company. And the people they had in there were maybe old Korean vets that didn't know anything about the tactics, anything about the airplanes. And so he asked me if I would take command of that unit. I'd have 36 helicopters. I could fly them anytime I wanted to. And I jumped at the chance. So I could have my cake and eat it too. I could have my civilian career and still, keep my foot in the military. That was marvelous for me. In fact, we'd set aside my National Guard pay all the time, and that's what put my 3 kids through college.
Moved to Louisville.
What brought me to Louisville, Kentucky? I mentioned I'd started a career with GE to see if I could do anything besides kill people and blow things up. And GE put me through a marvelous training program. I started working for them in Connecticut. I moved to Cleveland, Ohio. I moved to Gainesville, Florida, and eventually up to Louisville to be the general manager of General Electric Company's major appliance business throughout the world. This is all foreign stuff. I had no customers in the 50 American states. All my business was South America, Europe, Middle East, Asia, a little bit of Africa. They don't have a lot of money. And so GE moved me to Louisville. And I have to tell you, we have never lived any place that we haven't enjoyed, because military taught me that. Just a short story. After Vietnam and R&R at home, I got on a flight in New Jersey to go to Germany for tour duty, flying Cobras at that time along the East German and Czech border. And I'm on a whole flight, and all these guys are, oh, this Germany, I can't wait. I already know I'm going to buy an Alfa Romeo when I get over there. I'm going to get a girlfriend that has blonde hair and blue eyes, and I'm going to live happily ever after. I can't wait to get to Germany. And it's all these other troops on the, oh boy, it's going to suck, and this is going to be awful. I'll bet they don't even speak English over there, and I heard they don't have any McDonald's, and they'd already decided they were going to have a terrible time there. I'd already decided I was going to have a wonderful time there. So, and the military taught me that. I mean, it's your choice. Misery is optional. And when it was time to take the wife and the kids, and move from Connecticut to Cleveland, in fact, the real estate lady that was taking me around said, now let me see, you live in Connecticut near the seashore, you got a ski lodge in Vermont, and you're moving to Cleveland, Ohio, and somebody told you this was a promotion? And it really was. But I said, this is going to be wonderful. I said, got the Cleveland Browns, you got the Cavaliers. They had a hockey team, I think, at that time. I said, we're going to have a ball in Cleveland. And we did. Moving to Florida. What's not to love about Florida? Come to Louisville. We came up here the very first weekend we were here house hunting. My boss took my whole family and I to Churchill Downs, and I said, we don't know much about horses or racing or anything. He said, Pat Day, Pat Day, Pat Day. That's all I can tell you. He's a local famous jockey. And he said, if Pat Day is on the horse, he said, you got about a 70% chance of winning. And we won a couple $100 that day, betting Pat Day. And the kids loved it. I gave them a little $2 to bet. And so day one, they loved Louisville, Kentucky.
Personal treasures.
I have many treasures, and I call them that I brought back from Vietnam. I've got pieces of shrapnel. I've got empty 7.62 cases, a couple 105 artillery pieces, and lots of other things. But I have one thing that is my number one treasure, and it's a painting done by a guy named Joe Klein, who was a infantry trooper in Vietnam. Began to sketch over there, came back to the States, and became a pretty prolific painter. And about 30 years ago, through the magic of the internet, on a First Cav website, I was able to hook up with Sergeant Donald Frederick, and we emailed and did things like that, and then we began to talk on the phone, and got reacquainted, and shared, what our lives had been like, the 20 years after Vietnam, and he was so moved by getting us reacquainted that he knew about this artist, and he contacted him, and he said, I wonder if I told you a story about what happened to me in Vietnam, do you think you could turn that into a picture? And he said, tell me the story. So Sergeant Frederick told him the story that I've shared with you, and Joe Klein put together an absolutely perfect picture of our helicopter, my name on the side, the door gunner's name, which is hard to see, Sergeant Donald Frederick underneath that, our 48 rocket pods, my wingman behind me, some white phosphorus that we'd shot onto the ground, a burning LZ, and that came rolled up in a tube to me several months after Sergeant Frederick and I got reacquainted. I opened it up, and I have to tell you, I burst into tears. It just brought back so many memories of friends, other pilots, crew chiefs, members that I had lost over there. And my wife, the great artist she took it to a professional framer, had it framed. It hangs in a spot in our home of honor. The rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would tell you, is that we continued to talk over the telephone every couple weeks. And I noticed a change of the tone of voice. I noticed kind of a weakness in Don Frederick, Sergeant Frederick. And I said, hey, buddy, talk to me. What's going on? And I said, you really sound bad. And, yeah, you've had the cold and the flu now for about 5 months. And he said, Captain, he still called me Captain. He said, yeah, I got cancer. I said, how bad is it? He said, it's bad. He said, next week I'm going to hospice. And I said, where are you going? Give me the address and so forth. So I flew to New Orleans where he was living, and I spent 5 days with him. Certainly all day long, and yeah, at nighttime when he'd be on meds and so forth, I'd go back to a motel. I left after 5 days. He died about 5 days after that. And so maybe you see why this picture is such a treasure to me. I'm still alive. My co-pilot's still alive. The crew chief is still alive today. We're all old dogs, but we're here, and Sergeant Frederick has gone ahead to prepare the next LZ for all of us.
Roger, Falcon 6. This is Falcon 7 Alpha, Romeo Tango Bravo. Over.